if I'm flying on bar with hands on the C's, do I start that motion with the C's?
You can do.
The brakes?
No, you can do it on the C's, and but generally, if you can do it on the C's if it's just going to kind of a small frontal and the nose starts to brake, then a C input is good. But if it just completely turns upside down, then the brakes is the better option. So it does depend on the size and the violence of that collapse. A quick jab on the B's does the same job as releasing the B's, coming off your brakes and back up again. So B control is quite useful. And whether your glider's got, even for the 3-line gliders, the 3-riser gliders, again, when you're using the bar, you've got all that feel and control on your C's. So I recommend, I've been doing it for years, and lots of people have been doing it for years, on riser control, is really using our risers. Okay, it may need a slight adjustment for you because it's a bit strange at first, but when you're using your speed bar, which we have to do these days on modern wings, there's no point in having all this performance that we're making and you're not using it by not using your bar in heavy sink or headwind crossings and the like. So using your bar and getting used to using your bar is fundamental to improving yourself as a pilot, to making yourself more efficient when you fly.
And quite surprisingly safer as well, because you get a bigger range of the speed to work with the throttles.
Yeah.
You know, when you are hitting the wall of the rising air, your speed bar is really tough and really strong, so push it even more, so get through that wall. You know, when you are getting into a huge sink and the whole glider starts deflating, you just release the speed bar, and that thing just helps you not to even have a collapse in any trouble. Because the speed bar, when you are on it, tells you what's happening on the front of the glider. And you feel it with your leg quite easily. And you release it, you get 10, 15 kilometers to spare before any troubles happen. And then you get the full range of the brake. So to use the speed bar is actually the safer option than any of you can imagine, especially when you fly through turbulence. Because the turbulence, through the speed bar, you will have the trouble knowledge before it even happened.
It's about gaining as much information as you can. And the 3 ways you can do it are with your feet on the speed bar, feeling the pressure of the nose on the bar. You can take the rear risers, you can feel the air. If the air goes totally smooth, you can release all the pressure, that's no problem. When the air turbulates again, a little bit of pressure to feel the air. And for me, the most important thing, the best way to get information from your wing is with your eyes. It's much quicker than feel. Think about it. You've got 8 meters of elastic line, you've got a soft thing above your head, and yeah, feel is really important. When I was taught to fly, I was taught never look at your wing. Never look at your wing. Use feel. Do not look at your wing. I think that was probably the worst information I was ever given. I think it's useful as a beginner pilot when you're doing your first few flights, you're a P1, P2 or whatever, and you're under control of an instructor. But in turbulent air, the only thing I care about is that thing above my head. So when I fly, my life is just that. That's the only thing that's important to me. And you can see the glider lose its structure, lose its shape, lose its rigidity far quicker than you can just feel it. It all kind of happens at roughly the same time, but as much information as you can take, the better. So by looking at your wing, if I'm charging full speed, I'm always looking at my leading edge and then checking my direction. And I'm crashing into people. People are flying out. I don't care. I just want to keep that inflated. Okay. So using our sight, using our feel through the lines, and using our feel through the speed bar is generating as much information as you can. So I suggest, if you wish, to try and look at your glider a little bit more in turbulent air and take as much information as you can. So big frontals, go for a nice big input, just to keep the span apart, keep the tips apart. Side collapses. With a normal 50% side collapse, the kind of general normal 50% side collapse, we lean away from it, we counter it, we pump it out. Okay? Or we collapse it, we let it turn 90 degrees, and we use a kind of wing over recovery. The wing over type recovery is the most efficient. It's the way you lose the least amount of height, the way you create the least amount of drag. It's the best method to use if you're in clear space. If you're flying very fast, And we get, boom, worst case scenario, 90, 80% collapse with a high angle. The glider, we know, is going to shoot super hard and really fast. In these instances, I believe leaning away from that collapse is actually counterproductive and it makes things worse. Okay, if it shoots hard and you lean away from it, you risk getting completely twisted up very quickly. Okay, twist is a nightmare on a glider. You're disorientated. It's easy to then start pulling the wrong brakes and making it even worse, putting you into a spiral. And if that tip cravats, you know, a twisted, cravated spiral as you're spiraling backwards, is worst case scenario, and it's those sort of instances that you're going to end up throwing a reserve. So in very big collapses, the best thing to do is actually go with it. It's actually lean into the collapse. We found it in testing with the high performance wings, especially full speed, is because we're testing, it's like, oh my god, and you collapse the wing and you want to go, ugh, like that. And every time you go, ugh, like that, and the glider shoots and then it pulls you in towards it, and it all collapses and you fall past it.
Yeah, you get a collapse on the other side and game is over.
And then when you do the same collapse and you kind of lean in with it and go with it, it's
you're slowing it down.
So much nicer.
Yeah.
So on the big collapses at full speed, lean into it, go with the glider. Obviously that doesn't count if you've got a cliff face there, or if I'm there. Because I'm like that. I'm not watching you.
But if there is open space, guys, this is one of the strangest things I ever find out. The bigger the collapse, the faster your body throw on the collapse side, nicer it turns out. The more you are fighting in, the real trouble starts. It's strange, but it's honestly, when I did the 2 lines collapses now, I barely pay because I thought, alright, I lean the other way. No way. It's a trouble.
Yeah.
What are you doing with the brakes?
It's just a sort of small amount of brake, probably this amount of brake, until you get a bit more of the span, and then you can go on from there.
If I jump into it and I bury the arm at the same time, you never do wrong, because the glider is not there anyway. You know, your hand is just basically pedaling the air. But when you start gaining any energy or anything, that brake will help to open it, definitely. But you need to have a space, you need to have area around you, because you're obviously going to end up with 360 at least, or sometimes even 2 or 3 turns, and it's never perfectly recovered. There's always one possibility of small wingtip or anything. But it's the best to gain the energy, to get the energy, and to try to reopen the glider as fast as possible. So the leaning into it and bury the brake in the same time never did me any wrong. It always helped me out.
So how quickly does it wind up if it doesn't open immediately?
In a spiral?
Yeah, like
it usually won't get that bad, because once you start building the energy, you are leaning into a collapse side, the inner energy, the inner pressure of the glider start opening the glider by itself. Unless there is a cravat.
Right. Which,
if there is a cravat, leaning into that side helps you twice, because if you are comfortable with a set, if you ever do the set, that's one of the safest and quickest ways to get out the cravats. That's what I find out. If you have a cravated right side, you do the set on the right side, and you just jump it, gain the energy, and suddenly you're in a set with a perfectly open glider. All what you got to do is just go and you fly away.
Personally, I would, in a real anger, if you get a big collapse like that and you get the tip cravat, then my personal opinion is that you stop the counter rotation. You don't let it develop past the first 360. As soon as you feel it going away from you and it's like, no, that's not what I want, you stop it. And if it's not stopping, you stop it more. And you're looking at the wing, and if it starts to peel, then you come off, and you just have to reduce your likelihood of getting the glider in a spiral. By which time, normally, the beautiful thing about these modern gliders is that they do cravat, the tips do cravat, but generally when you get a big cravat, they work themselves out to a small tip cravat. I haven't had, in many years, a cravat that's big and stays big. They all tend to work themselves out to a small tip cravat, which can still create a lot of drag and spiral you into the ground, but they're not so much drag that you can't stop the rotation. You should never let it go more than 1 360 in a rotation that you don't want it to be in. You can always stop it. I mean, you might need to keep it in a turn for sure, but you can stop the nose down kind of spiralling.
Would you drag it all the way to the stall if you needed to?
You never normally have to, because if it starts to really dive, you just pull, and you start to come out. And then, of course, you're checking the wing, you're looking for the stall once you've got less energy and you're under it. But actually stalling the wing as it's here, spiralling hard with a cravat, why, you need to have a lot of power, a massive amount of power to do that. So I don't think that's... The major worry is stopping the spiral down towards the ground, rather than the stall at this stage of an incident. You know, it's nipping it in the bud. It's not allowing something to develop beyond your control. Because after 2 360s of that kind of spiral, if you're not trained, if you're not practiced with it, you're disorientated.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think that the sat technique is cool if you're over the water and you know what you're doing and blah 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 blah.
But you really need to be comfortable with a set. You really need to know how it works, what is the dynamics of it. Because if you don't try it.
Yeah.
But if you do, I find it always the fastest and easiest way to get any crowd out. But you got to know what the set is about, you know, how to do it, how to lean into it.
A spin versus a sat for that?
What's that?
A spin also an option
Spin,
then?
spin is never an option, because the gliders start getting really disorientating and it can work against your body and you can end up with the twist. So I wouldn't never ever do spin to clear out the crowd, because you can get into more trouble because of that. It's better to engage, keep turning the control and fish it out, pump it out, do something.
Yeah, with a stabilo line is very useful for that. If you do have tip bats, normally go for the stabilo. You stop the rotation, you take the time, you look at your stabilo, you take it. Because I've been there flailing at lines, but when you just take the time, look at the stabilo, take it, it's more efficient use of your time, and then you can pull and you can keep working up your stabilo till you see you're pulling the tip physically down, and then it will pop out. If that's not working, then you can go deep pump and just take the glider just to the stall point. So you look for where the glider loses its billow, it empties with air, and it starts to peel, and then come off, and then just do that repeatedly, and the tip will clear.
A question on that technique was, if you're trying to reach and fish out the cravat on the right side, for example, how are you pulling deeper and deeper while maintaining brake pressure on your left side?
You can just you can work your way up the line. I don't know that exact technique actually. You're right, it's a good question, but you can do it. You can do it.